Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG here today with another MTG Arena video. In today's video, I am going to be simply playing some MTG Arena, this time Historic Brawl. I'm a big advocator for Historic Brawl, but it's a format we don't get to see a lot on MTG Arena, so oftentimes it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to cover it. However, right now they're doing this Brawl Festival, which it's 2,500 coins to enter, and if you haven't already, time is almost up, but I've been playing it for the past week, and it's been a lot of fun. And one of my favorite decks to play has been Kasmina Enigma Sage. I was looking at the commanders I could build, and actually going into the historic pool, there weren't as many that I was excited to build around as I thought. But what really got me excited was being able to use some of those cards that are not legal in standard, but just use them in the main deck. So Kasmina's whole gimmick is that she likes other planeswalkers. And why does she like them? Because she gives them all of her loyalty abilities. So they get the +2, the -X, and the -8. And for reference, she's a 3-drop, so you're going to get her out pretty early, and if they do kill her, you're going to get back up to that pretty quickly, especially because we are in green and running ramp like Llanowar Elves, Gilded Goose, Arboreal Grazer, Paradise Roots, Tangled Florahedron, even things like Jiang Yangu. I totally just butchered that. He also works as ramp along with Uro. Oh my gosh, Uro. Today is just apparently not my day. Either way, this deck is primarily a Planeswalker deck, and if we actually pull up all of the Planeswalkers, here they are. You'll notice they start at obviously 3, and we have a couple of the more expensive ones here at the top. Now, essentially what this deck is trying to do is take advantage of some of the uncommon Planeswalkers from War of the Spark. You'll notice Kiora, I'm not butchering that again. Narset and Kasmina are all here, and they were actually all uncommons in War of the Spark, which was a Planeswalker heavy set, and featured a lot of Planeswalkers with pretty powerful abilities and high starting loyalty, but with no way to uptick in terms of getting more loyalty. However, Kasmina gives them that ability. For instance, with Narset, generally the play pattern is you play her, instantly activate her, which replaces herself. The next turn you activate it again, and then she's stuck at 1 loyalty, kind of just being an enchantment that if it takes any damage, will die. However, Kasmina gives it the ability to scry 1, meaning that you can technically +2 to scry 1, and then the next turn draw a card. So it basically turns Narset into scry 1 turn, draw a card the next. And it's not even just draw a card, it's being very specifically picking it. This Planeswalker is really awesome because, well, you can keep putting counters on things, but we are creating these fractals that all have counters on them, which essentially means as long as he's on the battlefield, you can -X to create an XX mana dork, which is so much more powerful. Plus, he has the ability to boost up the power of creatures if that's necessary. And then we have Kiora, who is going to kind of act as ramp if we need it, but also is a 3-mana 7 loyalty Planeswalker, which means theoretically with Kasmina out on the battlefield, which could happen turn 2 if we get a Llanowar Elf, turn 3 we play Kiora and create a 7/7 for 3 mana, or more likely a 6/6 for 3 mana, and then keeping Kiora around 2+1 to scry. And then Kasmina's pretty good at letting you create a 2/2 wizard every other turn, makes it harder to target your stuff. However, the real star of the show here is Teferi, Master of Time, which lets you activate abilities of him and anytime on every player's turn, essentially. And what that means is you can activate Kasmina's abilities at instant speed, at least through Teferi. So if you need a 1/1 chump blocker right now, you can, -1 him. Or if you want to, scry 2, or, that basically doubles the amount of loyalty he's getting every turn because you can +2 instead of +1. Very, very good. We have some other interesting Planeswalkers here, but they are just here because it's a Planeswalker deck. We have Spark Double, and then our biggest way to win the game is actually Bioessence Hydra, as it'll often enter as like a 25/25 Trampler. And then we have some mutate things to mess around with, because if you mutate onto the 0/0s, it's pretty good. Either way, that was a pretty long explanation, but why don't we just jump into the games? This is going to be like live recorded. I could go and lose these games horribly and not actually get to show off the deck, but I just wanted to do a little bit more of a casual video today, just to celebrate how fun this format is, mostly because it is so casual. So let's jump into this. All right, so looking at this opening hand, it's pretty bad. I mean, our only source of green mana is through Fabled Passage, which enters the battlefield tapped. We have a 5-drop, a 6-drop, and a ramp card, so I just actually don't like that. This hand is significantly better. We do have that 4-drop to follow up Kasmina, but we also have, the counter spell, which I think is going to work pretty well too. So you could argue that it's right to Fabled Passage right off the bat, but I don't know. because the odds of me not drawing a land by turn 4 are quite low, and actually we just drew that land, so we are going to play an untapped island, maybe, hold up the fake threat that we have a 1 mana counterspell, which does exist, of course. We do a Field of the Dead, which is really unfortunate. I don't know if we have any way of dealing with that. I may be running 1 Field of Ruin in here. So now we're going to essentially, you could argue that I should cast Alrund's Epiphany, or not cast it, but suspend it, or what is this, foretelling it. But I think I want to keep up Decisive Denial. It ends up not working out necessarily in my favor, but I think it's fine. We are going to play Crawling Barrens and then throw that into a Kasmina, which then we can scry 1. So this is another land. I think we're a little heavy on lands right now, so I'm going to throw that on the bottom. So we do get a Naiath coming out, which is a pretty scary thing. However, I'm not necessarily too worried about it. We are going to +2 to scry and see what's on top. Mobilized District is a pretty good card, but again, we are drawing very land-heavy hands. So my options include playing Kasmina. I'm going to do something I normally don't. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play Kasmina, and this is normally not a play pattern I would do, but I'm going to -4 her. Actually, that's wrong. I'm going to -3 her, because, this is going to double its power. If I were to make a 4/4, they would still trade, but I just don't think they are willing to make that trade. Of course, they could have boost spells, but I think this is honestly the best bet to prevent this Naya from doing anything, but we'll have to see. They also could, of course, have like a shock or a frostbite or something. They are running snow-covered lands. Well, that will do it. That is unfortunate. They can take out Kasmina now, so it may have been smarter to actually plus her to keep her alive, but I thought maybe we could just prevent the 9th attack in general. If we can get down Vorinclex, it'll be pretty good. Being able to have all your Planeswalkers enter with double is pretty good. Surprisingly, they go after Kasmina, which I don't know if that's what I would have done. I'm definitely going to be playing Kiora here, although it could be funny to kind of play a Vorinclex or a Kiora into a Vorinclex, which makes her enter with 14 instead of 7. But we are going to Kiora here, and we are going to just immediately minus, or no. We are going to immediately -6 her to create a 6/6 to try and, again, discourage attacking. I am going to play this Fabled Passage just so that we could theoretically Decisive Denial. We are going to scry and put that on the bottom, and then we are going to scry again and see what we get. We are going to put that on the bottom as well. All right, so theoretically they can't attack here. They could double Naya's power and attack, but again, I don't think paying 3 mana and losing their commander is worth that. So we'll just see what they do. I expect lots of fight spells, but a 6/6 is pretty difficult to take down with a 3/3. So we'll have to see what they do. We are, of course, getting to Alrund's Epiphany levels. This is in here just because, Kasmina gives them this ult, which needs a good target. And a pretty good target in a Super Friends deck is a extra turn spell, because then you can reactivate all your Planeswalkers. And if you have something like Vorinclex, it can lead to some pretty crazy play patterns. Let's see. This is pretty interesting, because they can then double power if they want, but they're not going to. All right, we're going to crack this to essentially get rid of more lands from our deck so that we're less likely to draw them. All right. We have Mind's Desire, not one I really wanted to pull. This one's really great with Kasmina's ult because you could be casting other spells, and then when you ult, you don't have to pay the 6 mana, which is often the hard part about this card in decks that aren't necessarily built around it. What I'm going to do is, because I'm not going to kill Kiora here, I am going to +2 her. I do not want the land. We are then going to -2 this Kasmina, then discarding a... Honestly, this just doesn't feel great without using Kasmina's ability. We are going to play Quandrix Campus, not my favorite land to be playing, and then we are going to scry 1 and see what we can get with Uro. Yeah, if we can. Does that feel like a good thing to do? I mean, we could create another big guy. We could throw out another Kazmina. Actually, yes, I'm going to keep it just because I really want a Vorinclex. Um, and like get 2 of him. That could be really awesome. We also do draw double cards because of Kiora, which is pretty awesome. We then are leaving open decisive denial mana. So looking pretty good. I would swing there, but we are kind of trying to outvalue our opponent, not necessarily go in for that damage right away. It does suck that Uro's about to get exiled, but it's fine. He drew us 2 cards, gained us 3 life, and ramped us for 3 mana. Still feels pretty good. So here comes a fight spell. I don't necessarily like that because that is going to let them draw a card. So what I'm going to do is I am going to counter that. It doesn't feel like the best thing to counter. I don't believe they can pay for that, no. Unless I'm just horribly missing something. There we go. So that should stop it, stopping them from drawing a card. Of course, I'm not actually worried too much about my 2/2. But yeah, we shall see what they do. They also don't have the mana to double power, which means my 6/6 is being the roadblock I really wanted it to be. All right, so now we're going to play Vorinclex. I really wish I could play Vorinclex into a Spark Double and just get 2 of him immediately. However, we are kind of not even that far off because Kazmina is a ramp spell here, but we are going to play him. Which he is another bigger body, although it is more likely that they can do something. We do draw a card off of Kiora, and then we can kind of go to town. For instance, if we were to +1 here, we would be able to actually, not +1, +2, well actually +4. I think we are going to +2 here, which again gets them up to 6 loyalty, which is getting to the point where it becomes very hard to take them down. Kiora is also going to... Is Kiora gonna do that? Yeah, Kiora is going to do this. We are turning through our deck very, very quickly. That might have been nice, but I just don't think it's worth it. And then we are going to also scry here. We are now at a very high life total. Ugin, if we can get an Ugin down while we have Vorinclex still out, which is not going to happen. Vorinclex is one of those remove on site targets. And unfortunately, I used my counter spell probably at the wrong time. But I figured if they were doing that to try and kill a 2/2, they probably really needed to draw the card. So yeah, hopefully we can keep that Ugin there, keep Vorinclex around, play Ugin next turn in order to kind of just insta-ult him, which can just win the game on the spot. I wouldn't minus him, although I guess I could, but if I -3, for instance, we do lose 2 of our Planeswalkers, and that would be the only reason I would want to minus. So if we do that, we are doing the insta-ult. Interestingly, then we could Spark Double him and then ult again if we manage to, I think, do the lands go straight onto the battlefield? Yeah, so if we get like 4 lands. So they are going to have a fight happening here, which, you know, is unfortunate, but you'll see they are very desperate to draw cards that will draw them out of this situation. We also can activate this ability, I believe, for free. So at any time we can get a 3/3 if we do need to like chump block for one of our cards, or if he makes us sacrifice 2 creatures or something ridiculous like that, which I don't really see happening in green-red. There are very few cards I can think of at the moment that would help. I could see the double happening here. If they do decide to pay for it, I'm just blocking with the 6/6. All right. If Vorinclex, okay. It has to be blocked, so we block with the 6/6. They draw a card. I mean, they're not doing much on their turn, so I guess it's not that big of a deal that they have to redo it. However, what is a big deal for them is the fact that I'm about to drop down an Ugin that enters with 14 loyalty, immediately -10 him, and then just dump permanents onto the battlefield, which would have included Spark Double, which would let me do it again. Pretty fun. That's a fun way to win the game. But yeah, that's generally how the deck wants to play. I've actually never gotten Vorinclex to stick around for more than 1 turn, just because in a Planeswalker deck, it is so devastating. The fact that most of my Planeswalkers, I mean, a lot of them don't have ults, by the way, but Kazmina gives a lot of them ults. So Kiora entering the battlefield with 14 counters means it can immediately Kasmina ult and then go get something like an extra turn spell to then the next turn plus again, which is another turn with Vorinclex out, meaning I'm probably going to ult something else, and it can get into this very difficult to get out of loop. This hand feels weird to me. Arboreal Grazer is kind of rushing us up a little bit, but then playing a Fabled Passage tapped never feels good. So I guess we go Arboreal Grazer into Temple of Mystery, holding up Tail's End. What are we fighting? Yeah, we want to keep Tail's End up. As soon as they have the ability to cast Turgid, we are casting like bigger spells, and so that is generally something we don't want our opponents to get their hands on. However, a lot of our value is token based, so if they are making us sacrifice creatures, that is something interesting we might be able to handle because we have tokens and they can't gain as much value off of that. All right, Alrund's Epiphany. I mean, I'm not worried about them getting it, but I don't want to discard it, so that is something I will have a little bit of a higher priority, like foretelling, as opposed to last time. And then we do have Kasmina coming up, both versions. All right, so let's see. I am expecting to lose this one. Turgid is a very good deck in, standard. And honestly, I have seen a couple standard decks in here. Funnily enough, that's not what I'm trying to say. Interestingly enough. But we are going to cast Kasmina to +2 scrying and getting to see that there's a land there that we don't necessarily need. So Kasmina will play next turn, assuming... Oh, yeah, they won't have enough mana. If they ramp here, I will save mana, but they're not ramping here, so we're pretty good. A little bit of an interesting inclusion. Does it care about when they sacrifice? No, it's whenever an opponent. So I don't necessarily understand that inclusion, but whatever. I want to get this Fabled Passage down and cracked before they get a Turgid, because that does not feel great. Cracking a Fabled Passage while an opponent has a Turgid out. So we are going to get an island. We are then going to scry and see kind of what we can get. And then we're probably playing Kasmina here. This is our last turn of having access to all of our mana, because we are going to have to basically lose 2 mana to keep Tail's End up, which, by the way, if you're not running Tail's End in Historic Brawl, it's a pretty good counterspell for 2 mana, and I know we have access to Counterspell, which I would argue is a better counterspell in Brawl, but outside of Counterspell, it is a pretty awesome one because it can counter triggered or activated abilities like Planeswalker ults, and since commanders can be... Planeswalkers, that can be pretty good, but it can also just counter. It essentially says counter target activated ability, triggered ability, or commander. So this can be very, very good. Now, one thing I didn't account for is they may play Turgid's Lantern, which is an annoying card to deal with, but we are able to -1 like Planeswalkers to get tokens. So if they do decide to play Turgid's Lantern, I'm not too worried. Now that is something that I wish I had Tail's End mana for, but then again, you could argue Turgid is a bigger deal, which I would argue that. This feels really, really weird to me. I'm definitely going to be blocking with this 2/2. Maybe they're trying to remove the amount of creatures I have. Maybe they want that in the graveyard. I'm not sure. But we are getting up to the point where we may be able to Karn's Temporal Sundering, which is pretty awesome. Let's scry and see what's kind of coming. Remember, we do want to keep this Tail's End mana up, but that doesn't matter if our next turn is an extra turn because it does untap lands. So let's start with making a token. I think I want like a 4/4, and then I want a 2/2. So we are getting a pretty big board out. Let's discard Karn's Bastion, which feels awful, but I don't think I want to discard any of these other cards. And then we can foretell this to make sure that it doesn't get discarded and we'll always have access to it. So our Kasminas are getting pretty low on loyalty, so in effect that gives them -2 loyalty, which there are like board sweepers that do that, would be pretty devastating here. But something tells me... you know what, actually, I was accounting for the fact that they guaranteed had the mana because of the devotion, but they attacked with the Woeshrider and got it killed, which was the only thing that was giving it devotion. So at this point, this taps for nothing, meaning if they don't have a land, they can't cast Turgid this turn, meaning we have one more turn before we have to use Tail's End. However, Nyx Lotus can mean that they spiral into their commander much faster. I'm expecting them to cast it here. They may also just be scared that I have 3 mana open. Nope, we are going to Tails End that. That is something. It's one of those commanders that is kill on sight, and this deck does not run as much removal as it probably should. But yeah, I think that was an important kind of call there. But yeah, Tails End is such a fun one to play, and oftentimes it will lead to an opponent conceding because these decks are generally built around their commander. Although this one was a little weird running Wolf Strider. Maybe it was more mono black good stuff. But generally, these decks are just full of discard and sacrifice kind of synergies. So yeah, generally, we won both of those games. The deck has actually seen a pretty high win rate for me. I would say it's above 50%. There are some decks that shut it down. Eskia, the best deck in the format, can definitely shut this deck down, but it does with most, especially because it doesn't run a ton of enchantment removal, which you could argue it should. However, I wanted to just play a fun game, not, what beats the meta. So yeah, it also doesn't necessarily get paired against the best decks all the time. It does see the occasional Turgid and Eskia, but there are some decks that will just always face like Eskia because it is that high tier of a deck. This one is like somewhere in the middle, so I really, really enjoy it. Either way, guys, if you enjoyed it, hit that like button and subscribe. Also, let me know what your favorite Historic Brawl deck has been. I did a Brawl, or not a Brawl, I did a deck tech last week. I am going to continue doing those, but I'm going to make them not every week, so it might be every other week or every third week or something along those lines. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. I will see you in the next one. Bye.